Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. The house was still, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of traffic outside. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, savoring the rare moment of solitude before the day picked up its usual pace. My morning routine had become a comforting ritual, a small slice of peace in the chaos of family life. But today, something unusual awaited me. It was the mailbox, an ordinary metal box that stood at the end of our driveway, that had delivered an extraordinary surprise. An envelope, plain and unremarkable, had arrived without a return address. My name was written on it in neat, precise handwriting, but the sender's identity was obscured by the absence of any identifying details. With a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. As I unfolded it, a photograph slipped out and landed on the table. My breath caught in my throat. The image was explicit, my wife, Lily, in the throes of an intimate moment with someone I recognized instantly. It was David, my oldest son from my first marriage. I could hardly process what I was seeing. The photograph seemed surreal, a betrayal so profound that it defied belief. I tried to steady my hands, the edges of the photo feeling like shards of glass. The note accompanying it was brief but chilling: "She's been unfaithful. Get the truth before it's too late." My mind raced. Lily had always been the center of my world, a bright spot that I'd thought I could trust without reservation. And David, he was my son, my responsibility. I'd thought I was giving him a chance for a fresh start when I married Lily. How had everything gone so terribly wrong? I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly shoved the photo and note back into the envelope, stuffing it into the kitchen drawer. Lily's voice called out cheerfully, "Good morning, honey." She appeared in the doorway, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "You're up early. Coffee?" She held up a fresh pot. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. My mind was a whirlwind, but I had to keep my composure. "Just need to think for a moment." As she poured the coffee, I watched her, trying to reconcile the image of the woman in the photograph with the person standing before me. It felt like a cruel joke, but the evidence was undeniable. I needed to confront her, to understand what had happened. But how could I approach this without losing my own sanity? After breakfast, as the kids left for school and Lily busied herself with household chores, I decided it was time for a confrontation. My heart pounded as I prepared to face her. "Lily," I began, trying to sound calm, "we need to talk." Her eyes met mine, filled with the usual warmth, but there was a shadow of confusion. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, my voice steady but firm. "I received something this morning, and I need you to explain it to me." I reached into the drawer and pulled out the envelope. Her eyes widened as she saw it. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm asking the questions here," I said, trying to keep the anger from my tone. I handed her the envelope. "Open it." Her fingers shook as she retrieved the photograph. The color drained from her face as she looked at it. She looked up, eyes brimming with tears, and for a moment, the facade of normalcy cracked. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what it looks like." I took a step back, trying to make sense of the turmoil in my chest. "What is it then?" "Because it sure looks like you've been cheating on me with my son." Lily's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. "It's complicated. It was a mistake. A huge mistake. Please, let me explain." The pain and betrayal I felt were overwhelming. My trust had been shattered, and my mind was filled with a single, unshakable thought: I needed answers, and I needed justice. Whatever her explanation, the damage was done, and it was up to me to decide how to move forward. "I need some time," I said, my voice cold and final. "We'll talk about this later." As I left the house, my mind was racing. I had no idea how this would all unfold, but I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but I was determined to uncover the truth and, if necessary, exact the retribution I felt was owed. The morning's confrontation had left me reeling. I spent the day in a haze of anger and disbelief, my thoughts churning like a stormy sea. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the living room window, I knew I couldn't let this rest. I had to gather more information, confront David, and find out if there was more to this scandal than the damning photograph. I decided to start with David. He was away at college, but he had a small apartment not too far from home. I hadn't spoken to him since he'd left for school, but I couldn't put off confronting him any longer. I drove to his apartment complex, my mind clouded with a mix of dread and determination. David's building was a modern, brick-faced structure with a neat, manicured lawn. I parked in visitor parking and made my way up to the second floor. I took a deep breath and knocked on his door. After a moment, the door creaked open, and David stood there, looking slightly disheveled but alert. "Dad? What's up? Can I come in?" I asked, my voice strained but firm. "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "Everything okay?" As soon as I crossed the threshold, I could tell something was off. David's apartment was clean but sparse, and the tension in his posture was palpable. I didn't waste time on small talk. I took out the photograph from the envelope and held it up for him to see. David's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" he stammered. "That's not important right now," I said. "What matters is that you explain this to me. I want the truth." David sat down on the edge of his couch, his hands clasped together. Look, Dad, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what I'm supposed to think," I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Lily have been involved in something that crosses every boundary of trust and decency." David looked away, staring at the floor. "It was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened. It was just a one-time thing." "A one-time thing?" I echoed incredulously. "You're my son, and she's my wife. This is far beyond a simple mistake. You've broken our family." David's eyes were filled with remorse. "I know. I'm sorry. I really am. But it was complicated. There were things happening between us that I didn't know how to handle." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lily. "Please, let's talk. This is tearing us apart." I ignored it, my focus solely on David. "You're going to have to do better than that, David. I need details. What's this complicated situation?" David sighed deeply. "We both got caught up in something. Lily was feeling neglected. I was feeling vulnerable. One thing led to another. I didn't think it would get out of hand like this." I rubbed my temples, trying to process his words. "So this wasn't a premeditated affair. It just happened." David nodded, his eyes still on the floor. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I regret it more than you can imagine." I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger and hurt bubbling within me. "This doesn't excuse what happened. You need to understand how this has affected me and your mother." "I understand," David said, his voice barely audible. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." I stared at him, weighing his sincerity. "We'll see. For now, I need you to stay out of sight. I need to figure out what to do next." I left David's apartment feeling a mix of anger and pity. He was my son, after all, and seeing him in such distress was painful. But that didn't change the fact that Lily's betrayal was a wound that needed to be addressed. When I returned home, Lily was waiting for me in the living room. Her face was tear-streaked, and her eyes were red from crying. "Can we talk now?" she asked softly. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit down. "Let's talk." She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands wringing in her lap. I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be. But please, hear me out. I took a seat across from her, crossing my arms. I'm listening. It was a mistake, as David said, Lily began. But there's more to it. We both got lost in a moment of weakness. I've been feeling disconnected from you for a while now. It's not an excuse, just an explanation. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Disconnected? I said, my voice laced with disbelief. You chose to betray me with my own son. That's not just a moment of weakness, that's a fundamental failure of trust. I'm sorry, Lily repeated, her voice breaking. I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, can't we try to work through this? I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. I don't know if working through this is possible. The damage is done, and it's going to take a lot more than apologies to fix it. Lily looked desperate. Please, let's at least try. For the sake of our family. I stood up, shaking my head. I need some time to think. I don't know if I can forgive this. As I walked away, I felt the crushing reality of my situation. Everything was in disarray, and the path forward seemed obscured by betrayal and hurt. The foundation of our family had been shaken, and now I had to figure out how to rebuild or if it was even worth trying. The days ahead promised to be challenging. The betrayal had been laid bare, and now, the consequences of Lily's actions were set to unfold. The house was eerily quiet as I paced the living room, the weight of the confrontation with Lily and David settling heavily on my shoulders. The reality of the betrayal had shifted from an emotional shock to a tangible problem that demanded a resolution. My mind raced with thoughts of what needed to be done next. The following morning, I received a call from an old friend, Rick, a private investigator I hadn't seen in years. His voice on the other end of the line was a welcome distraction from the chaos that had become my life. Hey, Rick. It's good to hear from you, I said, trying to mask the tension in my voice. Same here, John. I got your message. You mentioned something about needing my help. I took a deep breath. Yes. It's a complicated situation. My wife, Lily, has been unfaithful, and it's more than just a typical affair. I need to know everything that's been going on. Can you help? Absolutely, Rick said with determination. I'll start digging into it. Meet me at my office in an hour, and we'll go over the details. I hung up, feeling a glimmer of hope. Rick had always been thorough and efficient, and I hoped he could provide the clarity I needed. An hour later, I walked into Rick's office, a modest space cluttered with files and surveillance equipment. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing look. Sit down, John, he said, gesturing to a chair. Let's get into it. I took a seat, and Rick pulled out a notepad and pen. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything you know. I recounted the events leading up to the discovery, the anonymous letter, the photograph, and my conversation with David and Lily. Rick listened intently, jotting down notes and occasionally asking for clarifications. So, to sum up, Rick said after I finished, you've got a cheating wife and a son who's been involved in this affair. You need to know the extent of it, right? Exactly, I said. I want to know if there's more to this than what's already come to light. Rick nodded. I'll start by checking into Lily's recent activities and connections. I'll also look into any potential evidence of ongoing communication between her and David. Anything else you want me to focus on? I thought for a moment. Yes, see if there's any sign of financial transactions that might indicate something unusual. Sometimes, people spend money to cover up their secrets. Got it, Rick said. I'll get started right away. Expect an update within a couple of days. With that, I left Rick's office feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. The next few days were a blur of tense anticipation and restless nights. I focused on keeping up appearances at home, but the underlying tension was palpable. 2 days later, Rick called with an update. I met him at his office, where he was waiting with a folder full of documents and photographs. "All right, John," Rick said, handing me the folder. "I've got some information for you." I opened the folder and scanned through the contents. There were pictures of Lily meeting with a man I didn't recognize, as well as records of phone calls and text messages. But what caught my attention were the bank statements showing several large cash withdrawals. "Who's this guy?" I asked, pointing to one of the photos. "That's someone I found out to be a known associate of Lily," Rick said. "His name is Greg Hall. He's been in and out of town and has a reputation for getting involved in shady dealings." I felt a surge of anger. So she's been seeing him as well? This is worse than I thought. Rick nodded. "It looks like Lily's been involved with Hall for some time. The transactions and meetings suggest there was more going on than just a brief affair with David." "This is incredible," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I thought it was just a betrayal with David, but this..." "It's definitely more complex," Rick agreed. "The financials indicate there's more to uncover. If you want, I can dig deeper into Hall's background and see what other connections he might have." "Please do," I said. "I need to know everything. I want to understand just how deep this goes." Rick promised to continue his investigation, and I left his office with a heavy heart. The revelations were unsettling, and my sense of betrayal was now compounded by the discovery of Lily's deeper involvement with someone else. Back home, the atmosphere was tense. Lily seemed to sense that something had shifted, though she couldn't pinpoint what. When I returned, she tried to approach me, her eyes full of hopeful desperation. "John, can we talk?" she asked softly. "I'm not sure there's much left to say," I replied, my voice cold. "I've learned more than I wanted to know. And it's not just about you and David anymore." Lily's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say," I said, "there are more layers to this mess than you've admitted." As I walked away from her, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The truth was becoming more complex, and the path forward seemed increasingly uncertain. But one thing was clear: the fallout from this betrayal was far from over, and I was determined to see it through to the end. Days blurred together as I waited for Rick's final report. The intensity of the situation left me on edge, each moment fraught with anticipation. The house, once a haven of normalcy, now felt like a battleground. Lily and I barely spoke, our interactions reduced to terse exchanges and stony silences. The atmosphere was electric with unspoken tension. Finally, Rick called with the news I had been dreading. I arranged to meet him at his office, the urgency in his voice signaling that this would be a pivotal moment. Rick's office was as cluttered as ever when I arrived. He greeted me with a serious expression, indicating that this meeting was going to be anything but routine. "I've got the full picture," he said, motioning for me to sit. I took a seat and tried to steady my nerves. "What did you find?" Rick handed me a new batch of documents and photographs. "Here's the deal." The deeper I dug into Greg Hall's background, the more troubling things I uncovered. It turns out Hall isn't just a shady character, he's been involved in organized crime. And it gets worse. I traced some of the cash withdrawals Lily made to his accounts. I flipped through the documents, my heart sinking with each page. "So she's been involved with criminals?" Rick nodded. "Yes, and there's more. Hall had been blackmailing Lily. She was involved with him, but it wasn't entirely voluntary. Hall was using her to cover up his illegal activities." I stared at the evidence, stunned. So Lily was a pawn. That changes everything. But it doesn't excuse the betrayal with David. "No, it doesn't," Rick agreed. "But it explains why she might have been so secretive and desperate." The revelation hit hard. It wasn't just Lily's betrayal with David, there was a web of deceit involving dangerous people. I needed to confront Lily with this new information, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. When I got home, Lily was sitting in the living room, looking more anxious than usual. She looked up as I entered, her eyes searching my face for any sign of resolution. "I've got something to tell you," I said, my voice tight. "Rick uncovered more information. It turns out Greg Hall was blackmailing you." Lily's face went ashen. "You know about Hall?" "Yes," I said. "I know everything. The cash withdrawals, the meetings, and the fact that you were forced into this. But it doesn't excuse your betrayal with David." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she stood up. "John, I was trapped. I didn't know how to get out. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't want this." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. "It's not just about your involvement with Hall. It's about the trust that was shattered. You betrayed me, and you betrayed David." "I know," Lily said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I was desperate and scared. But I never meant to hurt you like this." Her pleas were hollow. The damage was done, and the revelation of Hall's blackmail only added to the chaos. My heart ached with the weight of her betrayal and the broader implications of her involvement with dangerous people. "We need to end this," I said, my voice resolute. "I can't move past this. The betrayal with David was one thing, but the deceit and danger involving Hall are beyond what I can handle." Lily's face crumpled as she fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, John. Don't do this. We can work through it. We can find a way." I shook my head, feeling the finality of my decision. "No, Lily. We're done. I can't continue with this. I need to protect myself and my son. This is over." As I turned to leave, the doorbell rang. It was David, looking distraught. "Dad, what's going on? I've heard there's been more to this. I need to understand." I glanced at Lily, who was still on the floor, crying. "David, it's better you know the full truth. Your mother was involved with Greg Hall, who blackmailed her. But that doesn't excuse what happened between you two." David's face turned pale as he took in the news. "I had no idea about Hall. I thought it was just an affair. This is worse than I thought." "I'm sorry, David," I said, my voice softening. "I don't know if we can ever fully repair this, but we need to move forward." David nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I understand, Dad. I'm sorry for everything." With that, David and I left the house together, leaving Lily behind. The house that had once been a family home now felt like a place of broken trust and shattered dreams. As we walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew it was the only way to move forward. The lies and deceit had fractured our family beyond repair, and the only choice left was to part ways. The future was unknown, but one thing was clear: the bonds of trust had been irreparably damaged. The betrayal had changed everything, and the journey to rebuild our lives would be long and challenging.